Cool. All right. Few minutes. What do y'all think? Or get started?
I always like to give people like a few minutes just to, you know,
Awesome. Yeah, cool.
yeah.
Thank you. I'm good.
Yeah.
We'll be on Chicano X time because we're non-binary.
Well, and also, I mean, I don't know who all's coming, but it might be like, as we used to say in the 90s, CPT time. That's a long
Right?
time ago.
Yeah.
I know it's a long time ago.
Right,
We
exactly.
don't use that anymore, but
Yeah. We got a good group right here. It's all good. I studied with Luis Valdez Teatro, and he used to tell us, it doesn't matter if there's 500 people in the audience or one. And we'd go, and behind his back, I'd be like, oh, hell no, it does matter. You know, in regards to teatro, you know, the energy that you get from people, you know, but he had a good point. I kind of agreed with him too, in regards to just the content and what you do, right? You know, it's, all right, Angela Warren is here. Angela in the house. She's the coordinator. I noticed that, Marion, she's a coordinator of the transfer center, not the director. Right, Angela?
She's amazing.
Yeah. All right, we got a good crowd. Few more minutes. All right, Matt Mooney. Francisco Fuentes. All right, thank you very much, mister. So yes, Vic, we have a good community of Chicano activists in English, Chicano studies. Matif was a high school teacher. And just, you know, they're developing a ethnic studies department as we speak at Ventura College. And I've been able to develop a very, very strong ethnic studies department at Santa Barbara City College. So good stuff. All right, Susan is with us from Denver. Thanks, Susan. Okay. I'm gonna get started if that's okay with everybody. What do you think, Vicky? Yes? Okay. All right, here we go, people. All right. My name is Dr. Tomas Avila Carrasco, and I am the chair of American Ethnic Studies at Santa Barbara City College. And I would like to welcome you to reading and writing at the California Community College system. We are going to be addressing AB 705 and AB 1705, just the concept of teaching reading and writing at the California Community College system. Before we get into the actual presentation, I wanted to go over some definitions so we are all on the same page. Real quick, I wanted to talk about the concept of race. So again, you know, this is definitely a situation in English, but this is a Chicano Studies event. And so I just wanted to lay the foundation so we're on the same page and even have a discussion. So like in Chicano Studies and Ethnic Studies, I teach that race, the Black race comes from Africa, The white race comes from Europe, the red race comes from the Americas, and the yellow race comes from Asia. That being said, then I make the claim there is no such thing as race. Race does not exist. And how do I substantiate that claim? There is no such thing as a race gene in the human DNA, right? Race does not exist. It is a social construct. So that concept segues into racism. Race does not exist, but racism does. And the definition of racism, it is when one group excludes another group from housing, education, healthcare, and capital. Racism is systematic. It is a system when one group excludes another group from housing, education, healthcare, and capital. And a perfect example of racism is US slavery. That is undebatable. With that being said, I just wanted to get us on the same page in regards to the concept of race. The next concept that I really like to teach in my classes and just talk about, again, as we speak, think of these concepts in the back of your mind. What do they have to do with our talk, right? Of the subject matters at hand. So one of the concepts that I teach also is hegemony. Hegemony is when the elites convince the masses that the elites' interests are the masses' interests. When the elites convince the masses that the elites' interests are the masses' interests. And this is done through coercion and consent. So as we go through this talk, I want you to ask yourselves, who benefits from eliminating all basic reading and writing and math at the community college system, right? In regards to, is it hegemonic, is it counter-hegemonic, etc. And then the last definition I'm gonna give is neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is a first instance, a theory of political economic practice that proposes that human well-being can best be advanced by liberating individual entrepreneurial freedoms and skills within an institutional framework characterized by strong private property rights, free market, free trade. The role of the state is to create and preserve an institutional framework appropriated to such practices. David Harvey. So this is a major concept I teach to my students. And again, I will claim that we are living in a neoliberal era, right? So the vernacular of neoliberalism is pretty much to privatize everything. Neoliberalism is individualistic, it's competitive, and it's anti-community in a nutshell. That's a Chicano analysis of neoliberalism in a nutshell. That's my take on it. So with that being said, again, what we're talking, and the other major concept that I teach in ethnic studies is structural analysis versus individualistic analysis. Structural analysis versus individualistic analysis. And my example of structural analysis is, say, I give the example of LA Unified School District. LA Unified School District is 700,000 students, 80% Latino, 50% of all Latinos are dropping out. So a structural analysis of that situation would be, what kind of teachers are teaching? Do they have books? What kind of schools do they have? Are they new schools? Are they old schools? Giving a structural analysis. An individualistic analysis of that situation would be, Juan went to Garfield, he got into Harvard, therefore there's no problem. Y'all with me? Okay. So then the other, so that being said, I just want to frame this. So what we're talking about here is AB 1705. We are dealing with the California Community College system is the largest higher ed system in the United States. It's 1.8 million students, 116 colleges. Out of the almost 2 million students, out of those 1.8 million students, 46% Latino, 23% white, 11% Asian, 5% African-American, 3% multi-ethnic, 2.8% Filipino, 4.0% Pacific Islanders, and 0.35% Native Americans. That being said, I want to go into this conversation by stating AB 705 was instituted in 2018. And then they wrote AB 1705. And in a nutshell, they were stating that remedial basic, English, reading and writing and math classes were holding Chicanos back. I want to state that there was never a crisis. Was there some students being held back? Yeah, there was. But in regards to a systematic crisis, it was fabricated by the chancellor's office and by people for some reason, and we could try to figure this out. Who is benefiting from eliminating all these classes, right? And then the racial makeup that it is affecting. And with that said, our first speaker is Joelle Mendoza. She's an artist and an indigenous Chicana from East LA that teaches English and rhetoric and communications and is with the Los Angeles Community College District. She is also an artist of ceramics and sculpture, and she's an amazing professor. So welcome, Joelle, take it away.
Thank you, Tomas, for that introduction. And I'm so happy to be here and talk with everyone about English and what's happening at the community college level. But also, I appreciated Tomas's introduction to talk about neoliberalism, get us kind of grounded in these key terms about what is going on, because this isn't just an English or a math issue. This is really legislation and a movement that is about widening the equity gap. And so I want to talk today about cultivating equitable exchange and space within the English classroom, right? So I've been teaching, I've taught at many different levels. I've taught at the UC level, at the Cal State level, at the community college level. I've taught also K through 12, public and private school. And so with all of that experience, I have been engaged with multiple conversations about how to, really create the most critical pedagogy that we can to create. What we do know is that reading and writing are the cornerstone for many of these students. And a lot of times, for better, for worse, right? The English classroom does become a gatekeeping classroom space. And so my job, and I think all of us who are here today, are really invested in making sure that that is not the case, that the English classroom is not a space where students get left behind, where students are not having their needs be met, and especially we understand if we also, in many of your Chicano studies classes, you will see that there's a long legacy of legislation that is really aimed at making sure that students of color don't succeed in academia. And they do it in a very, in a way that maybe isn't sometimes so clear, or so, it's sometimes even in the guise of equity. Right. And I think that that's what this legislation is. And so I want to just kind of talk about my experience, what I do, some of the work that I've been doing. I teach in LA CCD district, which is one of the largest community college districts on the West Coast. It is the largest. We have 9 campuses. And so we've been in a lot of, I would say, really fruitful conversations. Not everyone agrees with one another about this legislation, and that's okay. But we are still offering remedial English classes within our district. And that is possible because we have educators who are committed to meeting students where they're at. And so I want to
real quick, Joelle, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but just
no, it's okay.
Quick.
This is a dialogue.
Yeah, so we're having a dialogue, and pretty much I'm almost want to use this as a teach-in. So that is one of the major reasons why I have Joelle and Vicky here, is because of their expertise in teaching, reading, and writing, but most importantly, Pierce College, Pasadena City College, and Santa Monica College, they have gone around the law and they are still teaching basic reading and writing. And I wanted to literally, again, I'm giving you a structural analysis and I'm coming in with the individualistic analysis at the end. I wanted to show the people at Santa Barbara City College how other schools are dealing with this draconian racist law. I'm sorry, Joelle, keep on going.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I can speak from my district and the conversations that we're having as English instructors and math instructors around this. And so I kind of want to start with just understanding and situating this legislation within the context of COVID, right? For a lot of us who are in education, COVID did a lot, right, to our thinking about our pedagogy, about our students' learning, and how that has shifted. And so this is an article from The Atlantic, and you can read the bullet points here, where, you know, a lot of students in 2020 really fell through the cracks for various reasons. We were in a pandemic. We were in a state of crisis, a worldwide crisis. In Los Angeles, 4 out of 10 students just failed to participate in the pandemic, different types of learning environments. And what the bottom line is that a lot of rich kids got better schooling during this time than students who had lower incomes and students who were struggling with some of the daily realities of what this pandemic really illustrated for us, right? That there are a lot that these systematic structures really divide the haves and the have-nots. And so, you know, you might have a stay-at-home parent who is able to make sure that students are, you know, doing their assignments, checking in with their teachers. But then you have a lot of students who have 2 working parents, and now they're asked to learn from home. And what does that look like at home for them? So it really illustrated how broken the system is, right? Which is, for many of us educators, we do know that. And especially for me as a community college instructor, I often get students who have a vast, you know, diverse preparedness for entering the college classroom, right? I might have students who went to a private high school. I might have students who had a really, you know, strong academic background, but for whatever reason, they find themselves in my classroom. I have students who've been gone from the classroom for 10, 15 years, and now they're sitting next to, you know, they're in their 40s, they're sitting next to someone who's 18, who's just graduated. So with the community college classroom being as diverse as it is, we have a lot of students who we have to recognize have different levels of preparedness. And I wanted to start with this article because I think we have to remember that this legislation is coming out of a moment where the equity gap has gotten even more wide, right? And so because we're coming out of this the last 3 or 4 years where this was the reality for our students, the level of preparedness is even more extreme now, right? I have students in my classroom that are probably more underprepared than ever before. And that's just the reality, right? They might have gotten by with their junior and senior year, barely scraping by, maybe even passing without really turning in passing work. And then they register for a community college English course, and I'm really struggling with them to meet them where they are because of the last couple of years. And so now we have this legislation, which, let me go ahead. So let's kind of really look at what this AB 705 is doing, right? So what AB 705 is saying that it does is that their attempt is to eliminate maybe some roadblocks, that's what they call it, some roadblocks, and to allow students to directly place themselves into an English 101 class. There are many students who cannot directly enter an English 101 class for various reasons, for various preparedness reasons. And so If we actually look at the language though of the bill itself, right? Like it says pre-transfer level mathematics and English courses may be appropriate to meet the needs of defined student population. What I want to point out is that may, right? May is not must. And may is not required, right? May is may. And a lot of districts are treating this as if this is a definite and absolute, right? That we need to take all of these classes off of the menu for our students. When in actuality, when we do a close reading, it does not say that. It says that this may be an option. And also we want to broaden the best option to help students progress. And so if we want to help students progress, then that's where we need to really evaluate why is helping students progress taking classes away and not giving students autonomy to really self-proclaim where they see themselves at, right? And so what I appreciated also from Tomas's defined definitions was him kind of talking about how we need to really look at the structural, right?
So Joelle, so I'm so sorry to interrupt again.
Go ahead.
But again, I just want to re-emphasize as a Chicano studies scholar and the chair of American Ethics Studies at Santa Barbara City College, my main argument is that this bill changes the mission statement of the California Community College that states anybody could come to our college at any level. This changes the game for that. Secondly, it takes away choice. Students have, I'm not pro-remedial whatsoever. Let me make that clear. Students should have the choice. If you want to go into 110, fine. But if you need to learn how to write a sentence, you should also be able to do that. And then third, this totally eliminates students that don't want to transfer, students that just want to learn how to read and write. There's nowhere else to go. I'm so sorry, but I had to say that. Keep on going, Joelle.
No, for sure. And that's, I think, what we need to think about in terms of like, not just having this be a conversation about equity and inequity, but also about justice, right? And for me, as somebody who is, and all of us probably here are really invested in what social justice means and what it looks like and manifesting that into reality. And for what Tomas just said is that like, the community college is really there to provide access for many different kinds of missions for students. And we have a lot of students who are registering for our classes, who can't get into a UC, who can't get into a Cal State, and maybe don't want to, right? But they have these different agendas or missions or goals for themselves, and to be taking away that access for them, I think is actually not just inequitable, but also it's a social justice issue at large, right? And so we need to think of it as that. And so I want to just transition to, one thing that I'm just going to kind of paraphrase this is that at Pierce College in particular, that's where I'm from, we've had a lot of conversations about, how do we best situate students to place themselves in a position, where they can succeed, and we meet them where they're at. And so one thing our counselors do, and I teach in the PACE program, which is traditionally it serves non-traditional students. And so a lot of my students have been out of the classroom for a really long time. And so our counselor is really dedicated. Some of the measures that we used before was GPA, their English grades that they had in high school, sometimes even prior to, like, I remember when I first got hired, we even used SAT scores. There was different, like, multiple measures to say, okay, where do you fall? What English class is best for you? And now, students have access to just completely register in English 101, and that's great. But at the same time, a lot of, especially my counselor that I work closely with, has the conversation with them about really thinking critically about their relationship to reading and writing and where they feel like they need the most support. And so it is really a one-on-one conversation, because we approach it as one size does not fit all, right? We need to understand that one size does not fit every student objective. And so just with that being said, here's some data from my campus, which kind of shows like the enrollment in English 28 versus the enrollment in 72, and then the English 101. And what we see here is that some of the success rates in 101 did drop without some of the preparedness from 28 and 72. What we're not seeing, and this is something that we're trying to gather data on, is how many students did not register, or maybe registered that first week in English 101 and dropped. Right? We need to get that data. How many of them saw the syllabus, saw the requirement, they have to write a research paper, and then they thought, you know what, I can't do this right now, maybe dropped out the first week? How many students, logged onto Canvas and decided that this was not for them? We don't have that data. Or how many students just read the course description and decided not to take an English class, right? So there's data, and then there's the data that we don't see. And so I want to point out that. And so for me, it's really about coming back to centering student success and understanding, like I said before, that there is no one size fits all, understanding that we do have students at the community college level that have various level of preparedness, right? And I and other English teachers within LACCD are about adding tools to this toolbox for student success, not taking them away. Right. And so what a lot of districts are responding to is like, well, we're just going to take it away and we're going to see a lot more students succeed in 101 because remedial classes are racist and all the things. But I would challenge those folks to really think about these stories of students who have been out of the classroom for a long time, who maybe their high school experience was really uprooted in a way that COVID was really detrimental to their reading and writing. And think about all of these different experiences that now we are kind of setting them up in a way not to succeed, right? And so that's my biggest thing. And also I'd like to advocate for my students to have academic autonomy. These are adults now, right? We're not working with K through 12, we're working with adults. And if there's a student who says, you know what, this is just too hard for me, and it's too hard for these different reasons, and I need more support, and I don't have an English 28 class to point them to, that's a problem, right? And I want to trust their experience, and I also want to trust their needs. And so that's something that we should be advocating for, especially at the community college, but in higher ed as a whole, right? And so, like Tomas pointed out too, we have to remember what our mission statement is at the community college level. And at the community college level, it's about providing equitable and supportive learning environments, right? It's also about empowering, notice it says empowering students to identify and complete their goals. Not every student's going to have the same goal of transfer, right? Not every student some students just might be like, you know what, I got this new county job. I literally had a student tell me this. I got a new county job. I noticed that when I'm writing emails, I have a lot of misspelling, or I have all these squiggly lines. And so I just want to take a writing class because I want to improve my skills, right? They have no desire to transfer. They have no desire even for a certificate, right? But they really want to have a space where they can go and learn and grow. And so that's kind of reminding and centering that mission statement. And so when I say meet students where they're at, I want to kind of ground it in some particular practices. And so one thing that I do, especially with my English 101 classes, is I send a pre-semester email. So before the semester even starts, I send them an email that outlines what my course SLOs are, what my expectations are. I welcome them to the class. I tell them who I am. I really try to cultivate an introduction to who I am, what the class is doing. And I also let them know that there are other options. I'm not telling them that they should take those other options, but I'm letting them know that there are options on the table. If when they're reading this, they might want to self-identify as maybe, you know what, this is a lot. There's going to be a research paper. There's going to be this, there's going to be that. I don't know if I'm ready to do that. Let me see about those other co-requirements. Maybe an English 28 might be better for me. I also provide early assessments, which are ungraded diagnostics. So one of the first assignments that I provide them is a writing assignment about a remembered event, right? So there's no research involved. It's their own personal experience in which they're grounding. And what I'm able to do with that is really evaluate where they are in terms of syntax, in terms of language, in terms of mechanics, right? And give them a very clear rubric on what my expectations are. And what an A paper looks like, what a B paper looks like, what a C paper looks like, because sometimes students have this idea that, oh, I made it to 4 pages, it's an A, right? And they just think because they met all the minimum requirements that they got 100%. And so it's really important for me to be very clear about expectations with rubrics. And I'll share some of those later. And I also have student conferences within the first 2 weeks of the diagnostic review. So after I've graded and I've given them that diagnostic review, I make it a requirement for all of them to come to my office hours. Depending if we're in person or online, I might include that as part of the class. So I might say, okay, on Thursday, we're just doing conferences and you're also working on this assignment if I'm not meeting with you. So there's different ways that I scaffold that, right? I also have referrals, and we also point to the fact that there needs to be some late English 28 classes that start, because there may be students who start at English 101 and then they realize I need more support, and we need to have those classes available late for them. And then I also kind of talk about where they're going, not just where they're at, but where they're going, and give them a kind of preview of what English 102 is going to look like, English 103 is going to look like, and also our 200 level. Some other things I do is my syllabus. I start with my syllabus. Remember, that's your first impression, right? And so in terms of practices, I want to offer all student services. I want to talk about the options and the support that they have on campus. I don't just leave it there. I do a whole video if it's an online class, or I do a whole even field trip if it's an in-person class, because we know that students sometimes skim the syllabus, right? And so how do we do that? I give them assignments that actually get them to those doors and to those resources. So I'll say, here is a assignment where you have to go to the library and talk to a librarian, right? Or go to tutoring and have tutoring signed. So there's different ways, everyone's always looking for extra credit. That's something that I just incorporate and weave into my class expectations. I also have an opening piece about the relationship to reading and writing. For me, it's very important to create metacognitive spaces in the classroom. And a metacognitive means a kind of space where you think about your relationship to why you think that way. So a lot of students oftentimes will be like, I have all these ideas up here, but it's just, I have this problem getting them on the page. Like when I sit to write, they don't come out as smooth, and I'm staring at a blank page for a long time. And so I have a series of questions that ask them, well, how do you approach writing? What does your environment look like when you write? When do you feel most energized to really sit down and do your work, and talk about their environment, and just have them think critically about what that looks like? Because for a lot of our students, there's just sometimes this kind of goal is just to turn it in, but they don't take the time to stop and think about the process, right? And so I'm really hoping and trying to cultivate for them to think critically. Don't just think about the product that you're turning in, but think about the process of how you approach writing and reading, right? And if we can do that together, then we can provide and really exchange best practices, right? And I have them do that with a student in the class. We have a dialogue, I call it a conversation, a metacognitive conversation with their peers. And then they also turn in something metacognitively. Whenever they turn in an essay in my classroom, I also have them think about the process. They have to write an in-class, essay about what they're turning in. And so there's all these ways that I'm trying to help students really not just succeed in my class, but succeed outside of my class, right? To really gain these skills to help them and equip them to do well in the classrooms beyond mine, but also within the world, right? And so I also, like I said, I also have those early assignments that are, low stakes, but really communicate for me what it is that they need help and support in. And so really helping students understand what a passing essay looks like and what a not passing essay looks like, because some of them have never seen that. So I provide sample essays for that. In terms of course content, I also try, like we were talking before folks jumped on, how do we make our classrooms relevant for our students? There's great writing guides out there in the world, and there's not so great writing guides out there in the world. And sometimes there's textbooks that don't really speak to students' experiences. And so one thing I try to do is that first day, I like to talk to students and see what different majors I have in the class. I like to, if I have a lot of nurses, I might use an article about RNs and what they're going through, and then have that kind of be something that students are excited to read, right? Arguments and content that really connects to their experience. So that's some things that I do. One thing that I also do is I have a great relationship to the library resources on campus. And so one thing that Pierce does a really good job of is meeting with the librarians and creating content for the website for students to use. So a lot of students sometimes cite, they've never done a research paper. They don't know what fake news is. They don't know what real news, what's an academic source. And so we told our librarians, is there some way that you can help our students with really kind of mining through how to find better academic sources and really understanding there's so much on the internet. How do they understand what they can trust and not trust? And our librarians did an amazing job. And these are some of the first assignments that I provide my students with, is like, okay, we're gonna really be able to sort through what these look like and what's going to serve you best for this class. There's also research guides that my librarian has given me. And I also provide a research planner for students. And then here is the kind of rubric that I give them for that low stakes assignment, which really kind of, like I said, breaks down what an A paper looks like, what a B paper looks like, what a C paper looks like. So there's very clear objectives for students. And that is all I have.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Joelle. Love it. Thank you. That was a lot. So real quick, we have Vicky Vertiz, who has 2 books, Auto Body and Palm Fawn with its Throat Cut. Is that correct, Vicky? And she is the oldest of an immigrant family, teaches English. I'm sorry, has had her poetry essays published at the New York Times and many other articles. And Vicky, take it away. Welcome to our program, Vicky. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Real quick, I'm sorry, do you have a question, Marianne? Marianne, do you have a question?
He's clapping.
No, I was
Okay,
clapping for
He's
her.
clapping.
Sorry, I'm a dork. I'm a computer dork. I'm so sorry, Vicky. Go ahead, Vicky. Go.
Yeah,
go.
no, we are, well, one of the things that I do in my classrooms when we have to do Zoom is that we use emojis all the time,
All
because
right.
you can't, you have to express
Yeah.
yourself in all these different modes. But thank you for having us, Tomas and Santa Barbara City College. I'm down the street from you all in Goleta/Santa Barbara by the lagoon at UCSB. But I just want to start with saying that I am Really grateful for this space where we can exchange ideas. And I bet that there's a lot of you in here who, do a lot of these, have a lot of these practices already in your pedagogy and in your classrooms. And as Joelle was talking, I realized I was like, okay, well, I do similar things too. And so I think it's just important for us to realize like how much we do for students already, but how much greater the needs are than when those of us who are administrators or professors were in school. The inequalities have widened brutally in the last 3 years because of the pandemic and ongoing issues. But let's get started, and then we'll have some time to chat. So I'm going to share my screen. And of course, it's in like the middle of the presentation, so we're gonna have to go back a little bit. So this is an image of a student from a USA Today article who, in the middle of the pandemic, quit school and went back home to work because she just could not keep up because of all the responsibilities and difficulties and obstacles that the pandemic presented, right? But this article that I provide links for in my presentation also talks about the resilience of first generation and Black, Indigenous people of color, in particular Latina students in California. So I always come from a place of strength, so let's use our strengths to help our students. This is how I introduce myself in my classrooms typically, because I want students to know where I'm coming from. And so that's something for us to think about as instructors and administrators. How are we communicating to the students that we serve who we are and what we value? I was first generation, identify as queer as working class. My parents struggle financially. So that means that I have a certain perspective on programs and services like Medi-Cal and Medicaid that maybe some other professors don't. I have a public policy and political science background, and I've been in K through 12 and higher ed since 2003 in lots of different places, Oakland, San Francisco, all over Southern California. And I write about art, performance, environmental justice in my communities. I write from strength and beauty, not deficit. Writing has saved my life, and it gives me the freedom to say things that are unspeakable. Frequently, we think that writing is strictly, we would think of it only in an academic sense, and especially in classrooms. But I have to remind my students that we use writing all the time for different things, and that there is beauty in it if we can find it for ourselves. This is a picture of my mom, and this is our front yard in our 5-plex in Bell Gardens, California, which is a working class suburb of LA. Right by the LA River and the 710 freeway. That is a fender above my mom's head. There's a brick wall, and there is a garden that she has there. Why is this here? Because I want us to remember where our students are from, and maybe also where we are from, and that we were not always in the positions we are in. And if perhaps we were, then to think about what it means to be in a classroom where our students come from backgrounds and homes that look like this, right? We are creative, resilient, and we keep surviving things that seem unsurvivable, right? My pedagogy is my mommy in her garden. Where are your students from? So I have a poli-sci background, I have an organizing background. So to me, writing is an expression of that now, and also teaching. So what is social justice and education for me? The loose definition is that justice and equity is the redistribution of resources, opportunities, and privileges within our society. And to me, it is a classroom that affords everyone fair treatment and equality by meeting students where they are, regardless of their social categories, and despite the rhetoric of that academic meritocracy that never really existed. The bootstraps, there's no boots. So how do we get there? Through the study of writing. So I did a little research while you all were talking about the bill and the person who sponsored it. The person who sponsored it went to a UC, and then they worked in a Research One institution. So they did not go to community college. I don't think they've ever taught in the community college classroom. So we have to be critical consumers of policy as well, right? So like someone said earlier, follow the money, but also policy just falls flat for me. Is in fact also why I left it. I think education is much more effective for what I want to do in the world. So the Interaction Institute for Social Change created this image that illustrates equality versus equity. And I know that there was an illustration in AB 705 too, but don't think they quite got it right, right? So equality is the sense that everybody gets the same thing, but then there are the structural barriers right in front of us, right? And so for some of us, it's structural racism, sexism as well, ableism, and phobias, homophobias, transphobias, xenophobia. Whereas equity is giving people what they need in order for everybody to be in the same place together and to participate, right? And then liberation is not having to have any of those things because everyone is able to participate equally however they can. But there are also other ways of being. But in our classrooms, so what does this look like, right? So teaching in this context that we're living in, here's what I've been noticing, and here's what I have done research on that supports the experiences a lot of us are having in our classrooms. So the Columbia Teachers College has this incredible Institute for Black Research and Education that described the last 2 years as 3 pandemics: COVID-19, police brutality, and the uprisings, and the economic recessions that our students and we are also facing. Widening of existing inequalities. The Public Policy Institute of California wrote this really important report on students that intended to transfer and the effects that it had on them. And as we know, the things that our students were struggling with were mental health and are mental health, financial issues, housing, academic preparation, Wi-Fi bandwidth. My students in my writing course currently reported having to teach their young siblings the material, having to run the Zooms for them, and also do their own work. So there are invisible responsibilities that unless you ask your students what they are, you will not know, right? So we have to be detectives about who's in our classroom. But here's what I've seen at UC Santa Barbara in the last 3 years. My first gen and Latina students have been struggling with all of these issues and more. Sexual assault, keeping up with work, and then on top of that, academic preparation. As Joelle illustrated, and as we know, our classrooms are wildly diverse in terms of preparation and the resources of the schools that our students had at their high schools and K through 12, right? There are always exceptions. I was one of those exceptional students. You know, I went to Williams out of high school from Bell Gardens. That's a wild, it doesn't happen. But that's the exception, right? The majority of the students at my school had to work and support their families, and that is still the case. Why? Because we're still in a society that is structurally racist, sexist, and anti-immigrant, and will continue to be in that place. And so we have to be creative with how we support our students, right? So strategies for writing courses. So here's what I've seen, and I'll fix my slides in a second because they're a little bit repetitive, but these are images from an article in USA Today of other Latina students who were struggling during the pandemic. But here they're pretty happy because they're together, right? So this isn't in my strategies list, but we do a ton of group work, small groups, partner work all the time, because you have to redefine what participation looks like. We have, students who are super shy. Maybe they're, working through imposter syndrome of being in a college classroom and having been in classrooms before, perhaps being shamed for things they didn't know. I mean, if we raise our hands here about who's been shamed in the class, I don't know that anyone would not raise their hand, right? It's a tool. It's brutal, but it continues. So here's what I do. In my rubrics, I include African-American vernacular English, other languages, and other Englishes as appropriate if you're paying attention and you're using them with purpose, right? So this lets students know that I am thinking about all the different ways that we use English and interact with it, and know that we'll have different relationships to it. And it is in every rubric that I have for my writing classes. Also, I forgot to mention that I teach in the writing program at UC Santa Barbara. I teach writing composition 1 and 2. I teach in the small group setting that's organized through the Equal Opportunity Program. That's mostly first generation college students, mostly BIPOC students. I also teach writing for gender studies, writing for Chicano studies, and nonfiction. So, but you will find traces of all of these strategies in each of my classes. I value, like Joel, I value process via a point system where we turn in smaller assignments that are part of the larger writing project, and their final essay is worth, a majority of the points, but they, would not fail if they have completed pieces of the project that are essential for the larger piece. I require visits to the tutoring center when things are really difficult for students. I'll say in my feedback for this next assignment, make sure to visit the tutoring center, let me know who you talked to and what you picked up, and here are the things you need to work on, right? And then be ready to support with basics. Joel and I were talking about how we just have assembled resources that we know we're going to need. Our university actually has been really great about that. And there are PowerPoint slides that they provide to profs every quarter for housing, health bills, Wi-Fi, anything you can think of. Food insecurity is like this additional crisis that our students are facing. There's just so many things, right? So, but you don't have to assemble it because I bet somebody at your school already did, which brings me to this next slide where I focus on this. It's the first half of the second half of the last slide, but just so that it's bigger. I give global comments instead of just a writing overload, bleeding papers. That's so great if you can correct everyone's grammar constantly. And that's, we have to really think about the power dynamics in a classroom, right, folks? Like, are we just sitting there criticizing the student because we can, or are we trying to help them? Is that how you learn? Do you learn by being red inked? I certainly don't. So I've noticed that if I provide global comments and we focus on one or two things for the quarter to develop, that thing gets better. And then I give them feedback about what they need to continue to work on, right? It's honest, it's direct, and it's not an exercising of my power over students because I have some knowledge that they don't. That's not why we're teachers. At least I don't think so. Resources, gather and work with colleagues who already have this information across departments, right? We're trying to retain our students. If you really want to get your numbers up, keep the students you have, right? And that's going to mean extra work on our part. Why? Because our society has failed first generation college students, people of color, and working class people in particular. Who was dying first when COVID-19 hit? Service workers. Who has continued to suffer? Service workers. This is California, where the biggest industry is service. So let's remember who we're serving and why. Meet students where they are. I think folks know about that since Joelle went over it. Assess who's in the room with the initial writing sample, and provide diverse writing samples. I provide student essay examples from previous courses to make things clear, contextualized, and diverse. We know that our field of writing is largely white. It largely keeps people of color and women out. So how do we diversify the field? Is by retaining our students and making the work relevant to them, right? So notes and further reading. Here are all my notes and the resources that I went through to provide this information. I can share this PDF with Tomas so that you all can have access to these sources.
Thank you so much, Vicki. That's awesome.
And if you want to follow my work, you can. I'm on the gram and at vickivertis.com. So looking forward to hearing your strategies. Yeah, let's share.
Thank you. So when I designed this talk, I just wanted to show our students and our professors how other people are dealing. Now we are in a crisis. We are definitely in a crisis. So, I did this lecture up north, and I titled my lecture up north, Juan Crow / Jim Crow 2.0. And Joelle told me, Tomas, that was a bit much. So I totally conceded. We all have our own style of dealing with stuff, right? So I'm just like, but really, like, when I start analyzing and start deconstructing this whole situation, this is deep. Who gets to learn how to read and write and do basic math goes back to 1865, right? That's how they controlled the African Americans, 1848. My grandma did not read and write, but she could sew a dress. Man, she was amazing, right? She was so smart, but she didn't have access to, she grew up in Garden City, Kansas. So it's deep, and it's just as a Chicano activist, when I see an injustice, I want to do something about it. And I'm not even saying, oh, I am right and everybody's wrong. I'm like, let's dialogue, you know, and as the research shows, we need to turn, and that's the other thing that the ex-chancellor did. He turned the lens on the student. We need to turn the lens on the institution. We need to turn the lens on the English department. What are they teaching? Are they all teaching the same, books? What are their pedagogies? We need to turn the lens on Santa Barbara City College. We're all part of this, right? Nobody wants to talk about this, right? So I know you have a question, Marianne, but real quick, go ahead, Marianne. Go ahead, Marianne.
No, my comment about today, thank you so much to Vicki and Joelle. I really appreciated your presentations because, we put our students in groups. The new way of learning is that we want them to create community, to collaborate. What do we tell them? Working alone, work smarter, not harder. Don't work alone. Reach out, seek resources. And so for you, all you classroom faculty, and I'm going back into the classroom. I've been in the classroom. I've been teaching counseling classes, but now I'm going back into teaching Chicano studies classes part-time. As a faculty member, if I really think about it, I can get myself full of anxiety and feeling really inadequate that I have to be all for all, because I want to practice what I preach, which is meeting the student where they're at. And what both our speakers said today is that students come from varied preparedness. So I'm from Ventura County. There's 3 community colleges in my county. All 3 campuses are very different. One of the campuses is Moore Park, and their feeder high schools into their community college are affluent, resourceful, and they've kind of like eliminated the need for developmental courses in many ways. So they have a different type of student body, just the onboarding is just extremely different. They have a transfer culture that is very high. They have an honors program. They are, in TAP. They have alliances with UCLA. They have so much more programming. Then we have Oxnard College that is a benefactor of several HSI grants. And as you know, HSI grants are to really help develop that equal playing field for the institution. Sometimes they'll argue the grant writers, or rather the grant directors, it's not for students directly, but it can be. It's more of an instructional. And then there's Ventura College. And so at my campus, it's very different. We have 2 barrios that feed into our community college. We are almost 70% Chicano Latino. However, we're still invisible. They just fired 2 of our Chicano administrators, and no one's saying anything about it. And so while Joelle, you think that Juan Crow versus, Jim Crow versus Juan Crow was a little extreme, I don't think it's extreme. I think it's on target, because it takes courage to call a systemic, structural racism what it is. And this is by design. Our chancellor's office at the California Community College has co-opted many research organizations. Not going to say which one, but it's 2 initials, and they pay them now to publish and to produce kind of like what they want it to state, like transfer. They're putting articles that students are leaving the community college without a degree. So what? No one said you have to have an associate's degree to transfer to university. That's fictive knowledge. Yes, we'd like to encourage our students to have associate's degree, but before SB 1440, you didn't need an associate's degree, but now that bill was passed, and now we do have associate's degree for transfer, which behooves the student that's going to the Cal State to get it, because it sets them up for a higher priority for admissions. But everybody else going to like UC, out of state, independent, you don't need it. But my point here is that we are at a crisis, and we do need a dialogue, because some of our programs that work have been eliminated. We have on our campus the latest is 30% of our students did not pass English 1A. And I've heard no, like that's not a big deal. Like, oh yeah, some people have to fail. And I'm sitting there in meetings, not wanting to be the big bad wolf or come across as being negative, but I have to raise my hand and say, wait, 30%, that's a lot. That's, out of every 10 students, 3 left. And then they have the data that show they never came back. So it hurts. It's very painful that, you're right on, Joelle, when you say the data that we need. We are not seeing data before the 4th week. So we don't know who began, but they just present us data after the first census. And then we don't know data. We don't get the data like between the 4th week and the drop date. So it's this hidden, like a shell game, what's the real truth? The bottom line, what I know is that students are coming from underprepared. Some students are coming from underprepared, high schools and just community. We have returning adults. And as a counselor, when I sit with that student, at Ventura College, we do not offer any types of how to read, how to write. We just have the transfer composition class. And so I cringe, and I know that the student needs more. They need more help. And so it is political, because then I have to tell students about going back to adult education. I'm like, well, you could go to adult education. Their structure is year-long courses, which students want it quick. They want it faster. Or my other alternative is to help students go on California Virtual College. But many of my students don't want online learning. They want to have face-to-face and have a connection. So as a counselor, I'm limited, and it does scare me. It frightens me because, in the past, a student would come to me and say, I want to be an English professor. And then I would see their transcripts from high school, and I'd say, oh, I see that they were in, non-college prep classes. And I would say, no problem. And then I'd have to work on their mindset to get them prepared to be patient, to let's get you up, let's get your skill set up. And now I don't have that. So thank you, Tomas, for bringing in colleagues so that we can hear what they're doing.
And thank you, Marion, so much for your analysis in regards to, it's like the professor and the counselor, we're all intertwined. And again, I just want to create this dialogue. And at this time, I want to bring in a student to discuss his experience on how he's one of my students, Diego Las Gama, who's actually was a student at Santa Barbara City College. Now he's at UCSB, and God willing, will be applying for his PhD in Chicano studies. So Diego, go ahead. Diego?
Hi, yeah. Yes, thank you. Sorry if my connection is a bit spotty.
It's okay.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Diego. So I am a graduate from Santa Barbara City College. I had the pleasure of taking, I think, just about every class that Professor Carrasco offers. And I was able to transfer to UCSB as a Chicano Studies major. But part of the reason that I had that opportunity while I was at Santa Barbara City College is because I came in basically having to be met where I was at, coming from high school and going into the English courses specifically. I was not at 110, and I was not at the writing level that the college required, but luckily I was able to take these courses, I think at least 2 of them, that got me to the level where I needed to be. Same with math. So they were able to get me to the reading and the writing where I needed to be, so I could actually take the classes that I really wanted to do. And now, luckily, because of that, I am able to go through UCSB. I started a minor in Indigenous Studies now too. And a lot of it actually goes back to what I've learned just in the very basics of English. 98, right when I came into City College. And I'm not, this is the experience too for a lot of my friends that I recall going to school with. They either transferred or graduated or went on to something else, but they also had the opportunity, because of the remedial courses or the courses that were presented to them, to meet them where they were at. And I think it was very important.
Thank you so much, Diego. Good. Anything else
Yeah.
you want to add? Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so I guess in a nutshell, that would be my experience with English. Very positive having those courses. But then before I actually transferred out is when they stopped those remedial courses in English and math. And so I was pushed into pressured into taking higher level math than what I had been slowly building towards. And that was detrimental. So I failed that class and it lowered my GPA, and it made basically my semester and my applications to transfer to UCSB a lot harder because I wasn't just on the same track as I was kind of pushed to take the at-level course right away, and I just wasn't prepared for it. So I seen the both, like the positive and of remedial courses and the negative aspect of eliminating those courses.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight. And I just wanted to give a student perspective to this because what we're discussing is a lot. You know, it's just, to me, it's unbelievable that we're fighting in 2023 for reading, writing, and basic math. But here we are. I wanted to share my screen with you all real quick because, again, you know, one of the things in my class and my existence, I always tell my students, we are in an academic setting. You have to substantiate your claim. You just can't come in here and start talking all crazy, right? Fox Entertainment is not going to cut it. So I always had it. I had it perfectly when so right here, I wanted to share this with you all. I was on a committee. It was data collection, something.
Can
And
you
I
make
got,
it bigger, Tomas, so we can see?
no, I can't. I don't know how to do. How do I do that? I could read it to you. So this is the 2021-2022 English 110 grade distribution summary by ethnicity. So American Indians, 16 took English 110, 4 either didn't pass or got an F. Asian 198, 67 got an F, did not pass. We don't really know exactly. African Americans 99, 51%, 51 did not pass. That's 52% of all African Americans pretty much got an F or did not pass it somehow, some way. Latinos, 1,587 were put into, and I want to even say forced into English 110. There wasn't an option, right? And real quick, that's how Santa Barbara City College English department is interpreting the bill, right? As Joelle stated, it states in that bill, if you have the data, you can teach these basic classes, but they're choosing to interpret the bill at an extreme. And the other key thing is, like, there's a lot of people are using the word illegal. Like my dean, she's like, Tomas, it's illegal to teach those. You're absolutely incorrect. It is not illegal. You could, you know, if you have the data, and I'm showing you the data, 1,587 Latinos, Mexicanos, Chicanos that got put into English 110, and 658 got Fs, did not pass, etc. Pacific Islanders 3, 2 did not pass. 2 or more races, we have unknown, and then look at even whites. 1,640 got put in, 415 did not pass, right? And so again, I want to substantiate my claim in regards to it's not working. But we are choosing, we need to turn the lens on our institution. I had a meeting with the president and the vice president, and you know, we had a discussion, and they know what's going on. But in regards to and the worst part about this, to add insult to injury, I've had 2 English professors. You know, I debated with them, and I thought it was a debate, but you know, that when I gave them the numbers, they stated this has to happen, and I was just blown away. I think that's the most racist statement I've ever been told to in my entire life. This has to happen. Newsflash, this does not have to happen. And that's why I wanted to bring in Joelle and Vicky and just be smart about it. This is what other people are doing, and this has not worked. So I'm just hoping that, just like hegemony, it's not static, it changes. So I'm hoping that people, could actually, change their mind and say, yeah, and I'm just asking that because the numbers are different, right? Joelle, at your school, it's 23, our school is like, I think it's 80 or 60, I'm not sure. I just want students to have a choice, right? If you need to learn, and then again, like I say, not all high school diplomas are created equal. If you look at the high school people, the high school students that come out of Wainimi High School and Channel Islands, versus Thousand Oaks or Agora, totally different. And one of my best friends, we've had this long time debate. I always say how inferior my education was at Channel Islands, and he turned out to be a superintendent. And he always argues with me, no, it wasn't. I had a great education, blah, blah, blah. And it's so interesting because this came up and he tells me, and we were top students at Channel Islands High School, right? So when I went to San Diego State, it was like 2 years of good content, poor writing skills. And I literally, EOPS got me a writing coach, introduction, 3-body paragraphs, conclusion. And I went from C's to A's, right? And it's so funny because finally my best friend, he tells me, I had to take, and I like the way you say it, man, developmental courses sound so much better than remedial courses, even though it's, whatever. But, Jess, he tells me, I had to take a reading and writing class. And I was like, Jess, you just proved my point. We had an inferior education, like we were top students in our society, in Oxnard, but we went to mainstream society, we were below average. So, I accomplished my goals here in regards to, I want a dialogue. I want people to talk about this, our students. And the other thing I wanted to do, those 609 students need to be humanized. At my school, they act like we're this faceless, abstract, community that, like,
Tomas,
go ahead.
what they're doing is reproducing racism. They're using a deficit-minded lens when they tell me, oh, only 30% didn't pass. And then the type of programming is they're like, oh, we'll contact the students to find out how we can help them. That's othering them. Why not provide the access at the onset so that, a student can decide, I'm not ready, or if they want, go straight into college level, transfer level, or a student can have a choice and say, no, I really like to get some help, and then I'll speed up.
Yeah.
But by not giving them access to that developmental type of learning, they're reproducing racism, because now it's the deficit lens of the student feeling it's them, like, oh no, I passed. It's me, rather than the institution subverting that and the institution accepting responsibility. And as you state, showing the data. Okay, now we have the evidence, 30% of our students did not pass. So guess what? We need to offer this developmental classes and reading and writing and math. But it's like the shell game. And like you say, no one's is dialoguing about it. And classroom faculty, I would think, should be in an uproar, like, oh my gosh, I'm getting all these different levels of preparedness and I have to teach to all of it. How could I get help through assessment or onboarding our students to get the help that they need, so that then they come into my classroom, I could, be into my expertise, my discipline. But faculty are now having to teach the art of study, how to write it within their classes. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. Does anybody else want to add anything or just comment on? I'd like to open it up for discussion right now. Thank you so much.
I left a comment remarks in the chat. Oh,
go ahead, Susan. Go ahead, Susan.
Susan, now then come back to
Hi.
me. Thank you, brother.
okay, great. All right. Greetings from the Aslan Theater here in Denver, Colorado. We have to do with technology, right? So I left a comment here on the current situation at Oxnard College where I work. Oxnard College replaced remedial classes and support classes with students. They have the choice to add to their English and math courses. I'm on the early alert team, and most referrals, those are the most referrals that we receive. They are in English and math courses. I asked for data, and the IT team said that we are currently tracking, and I need to submit a request to obtain this data. And also in our community, we have a lot of ESL students who are currently struggling without these courses being offered. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. Thank you. Matif, go ahead.
Big thanks. Incredible amounts of information. Thank you so much to all the speakers. My question was exactly that. What's the efficacy of the so-called co-requirement classes? I mean, because I'm thinking if I'm a student, I got to take this extra 2 units along with the 4 units. That's now 6 units. That's taking away from other classes I would want to take. I'm just wondering, how does that really work? Has anybody seen this in action, and is it working?
Bottom line, I just want to add real quick, AB 705 is a bad law. AB 1705 is a bad law,
The worst.
generally speaking, right? Joelle, you want to answer that question, or?
Sure. Yeah, I think, we have to remember, would it mean maybe an extra semester of a class? Absolutely. Is every student trying to race to the finish line? Not necessarily, right? And so for your personal needs, it might not be the best, class for you to take. At the same time, for someone else, it may be the thing that they actually need. And so like I think we all are in agreement is that we want to give students and meet them where they're at. We've said that multiple times. And I think a lot of students, especially coming to the community college, they have different timelines, and some students are taking one class at a time because their parents and so they don't even take a full load. And so I think we need to remember that it's not a race, that every student is in they're on their own trajectory. And so for some, they're okay with taking another class or a prerequisite class, because for them, they may need that support. And what we're about is just adding more things to the menu, not necessarily taking things off, right? And I do want to speak to, like, I agree, I like Tomas's his heading that he had for his other talk. I agree that this is racist. I agree that I think what I also want to point to is that this is something about literacy, and it affects all students of color, and also it affects white students too. It affects everyone, right? And so I think for me, it was not about not comparing it to Jim Crow. It was more of just like comparing it to like this vast collective experience.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that this is something that affects Native students, it affects Asian students, it affects white students, it affects everyone. And so I want us to remind ourselves that yes, it definitely, I think it's right on, though, that Tomas is pointing this to other legislation that's happened that's really aimed at keeping certain communities underserved, keeping them not allowing access to higher education, right? And really widening that gap of possibility of what it means for them to think about their futures. And so it's a literacy issue. It's connected to multiple oppressive histories and multiple communities who have dealt with this.
Thank you so much. And just real quick,
Thank you.
I want to point out, thank you, Matif. I want to point out, we're dealing with 1.8 million students. And just the way my Chicano mind works, all of a sudden you're going to change the rules to the game. But when we are 40%, 46% of almost 2 million students, right? And so to add insult to injury, just so you know, on my campus, it's people of color that are reproducing racism. So like on my campus, students that got an F, they created this group or whatever it's called, RISE. And so like me and Joelle were discussing, the concept of RISE is deficit. Like my student said, what am I, at the bottom of the barrel? And I was like, that's a good analysis, right? So again, I asked some of my colleagues in the English department, like, why did you guys vote on this? And it was people of color, like Joelle, like how you were saying, how they got tricked, they bought into it. Simultaneously, it was Latino assembly senators that voted for this law. MelDef is voted for this law. It's like the NAACP being for Jim Crow. It's unbelievable. So anybody else want to add comment? How are y'all doing? I know we've been on this.
Sorry, I do.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Hello,
Go
Dr.
ahead.
Carreso. Pleasure to be with all of you academic professionals. Yes, with what you were saying right now, I think it's very important in this climate to point out when we see white supremacist characteristics, like you were saying, because it is possible for the oppressed to become the oppressor, and we have to call it out when we see it for what it is.
Yes.
I also had a question for all of you. How could we as academics, educators, advocate for advocacy for to try to have pushback on this law?
Liz, are you a SBCC student?
I'm actually a CSUN student. I'm in a teaching credential. I'm currently
Okay,
getting my teaching
right
credential
on.
at CSUN.
Well, could you and all your friends come to Santa Barbara City College, one of our meetings, and present, no, students are the ones that have the power, and like, that's why I want to include you. Actually, thank you, my colleague Lucha from Rio Hondo was like, you need a student's voice, and the students are the ones that need to speak up and be like, what's going on here? This is doing the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. And I love it, like George Lipsitz used to say, nothing happens by chance in America, right? And it's all, we're disenfranchising 46%, of the community college, and they're all mainly working class African-Americans and Chicanos. So, and it's amazing. Nobody is saying a word at my school. I'm like, they acted like, when I bring this up, they act like I'm Pancho Villa and I just invaded Columbus, New Mexico, That was a great joke, y'all. No, that was a dorky joke. But anyways, I'm serious, the politics behind this is unbelievable. But Liz, thank you so much for your voice and, being here. Does anybody, go ahead.
I think the thing, Liz, is also just, I think Tomas is right, and Lucha's, right on, is what we've done in our district is have students speak to their experience. And so there's many students who we've collected, because data is data, but we also have to remember who we are here to serve. None of us would have jobs without students. And if our students are having a crisis or not having access to things, then we need to remember that that's the top priority and we need to be serving them. And so, yes, going to Senate meetings, going to union meetings, going to district meetings, those are all ways that we can get involved. But also, sometimes that can be a lot for a student to do. Sometimes it's great to have a student say, just find that ally on campus, and then have that ally on campus maybe be that champion and help organize and strategize for best ways to move forward.
Thank you so much, Joelle. Yeah, so again, if you look at the where this came from, it's a right-wing lady from Westlake that supposedly wrote, Jackie Irwin, right? And it's pretty obvious nobody in her camp wrote this bill. It was outsourced. But she was really concerned with Blacks and Chicanos getting held back, and then the worst part is you have these Latinos like this Michelle Siqueiros, who's been the mouthpiece, for this bill. And again, in she had a presentation, she was stating, data does not lie. Newsflash, data does lie, right? And like at Ventura Community College, Paula Munoz states, they don't have the data, but Paula Munoz states, all I know is that I've never seen so many A's and B's in my lifetime. She's been there 40 years at Ventura College, right? So every college is dealing with different. Ventura College, could I prove this? No, but they're pretty much just passing everybody. So they don't have those numbers that Santa Barbara City College has, right? Santa Barbara City College is saying this has to happen. Or that is like beyond horrible. And then these people get paid. They're in charge of other programs that are they have these buzzwords. It's like these Republicans, like neoliberalism, right? They took these concepts from the Black Power movement, Chicano Power movement, and they twisted and turned and created a political economy that is oppressing people of color once again with these new tactics, right? Quote unquote. But anyways, thank you so much. The American Studies, Ethics Studies Departments, thanks you all. Joelle, Marian, you guys have, so a few, I always try to be the smartest person I could be. And I had the Amazing Race series first that I did with George Lipsitz, Gay Johnson. And then I had responding to Trump and his racism. I had Courageous Conversations for Outrageous Times. And so this is the way I speak back to power. And there was a lot of people on this call today, and it's being recorded. So this will be on YouTube.
And
So-
Tomas, I think the connection with what you're doing in these discussion is part of race lighting.
Yeah,
We've learned that we're not crazy. What we're sensing at the community college with the lack of curriculum and the targets of who's not getting the assistance, the immediate, it's like a setup from the get up. They're walking into underprepared and not passing. So what does that do?
Yeah.
It puts them on probation for financial aid. It lowers their self-esteem. It creates, the whole race lighting, like, oh, I'm not college ready. I'm not college material. I should just go to work. And it's really affecting a student's trajectory of upward social mobility.
and
And
the crazy part on my campus, people of color have been shutting it down. They're the ones that say remedial education is racist, right? It's like, no, 608 Fs are racist, Anyway, thank you, Marian, so much. And I just hope everybody learns and again, substantiate your claim. And it's our right. This is the foundation of democracy. And we need to fight back. And what we need is a new bill. We need a senator assembly to write a new bill. And we need to learn this has history. In 1989, they tried to cut remedial education, right? It was mainly for economic reasons, right? 1992, 1998. This has been around for a while. And the bottom line is, it's to cut African Americans, people of color, agreed populations at the knees of upward mobility in a nutshell. So thank you all so much. Joelle, Vicky, Marian, I hope you all get your honorariums very quickly, because Santa Barbara City College has a lot of money. No, we do. We have the biggest endowment in the
your
nation.
comedy's crazy.
All right, y'all. God bless. Good seeing everybody. And take care. All right.
Thank you.
Joelle. Thank you,
Thank you,
Vicky.
everyone.
Thank you, Lucha. Thank you,
Thank you for
Matia.
your work and your
Right
service.
on.
Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
All right,
Keep in
thank
touch.
you.
Keep in touch.
Thank you. We will, Vicky. Thank you.
Yep.